Hey everybody, welcome back to Haman's Advice Forum. I'm the Haman, and let's answer all your questions from Ask Me Anything that I posted, I think on the 6th, maybe? And someone actually posted a question, and then they erased their question, and there was an unanswered question from the previous one. So there's only one question to answer, but let's do it. All right, so there is one person who asked a question that I did not answer from the previous AMA by Zewtuube. Question number one. Do you think the coronavirus is a biological weapon used by America to destroy China, along with the Hong Kong riots and the trade war? I don't know, and that's not something I've really thought about because every time you know I've heard about like a virus scare from East Asia. There was bird flu, there was SARS, nothing happened, right? And I feel like if it is a biological weapon, it's not by America. It's probably made by the global elite who control everything, right? They control the banks, the multinational corporations, the important land. And, if you believe in that there's this secret conspiracy for world government, which I don't think is really that much of a secret, it's probably done by them, but I don't know because I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, right? And I don't think. I think. All right, so if I'm trying to explain myself, and this might be a little, the concepts might be a little hard to explain for me because I've never really thought about it, or I've never really explained it. I mean, but I feel like there's no real war between nations. That's just kind of made up so that you can get like hyped up and your mind occupied that people in Mexico are trying to take over this country, or stuff like that, or people in the Middle East. But really, I feel like the real battle in society is people from your own country, and I think that's been true in every country I've been to, where pretty much the people in charge look down upon like the lower classes, and they're more loyal to people of other countries in the same social class. So, for example, if I'm from Mexico and I'm in the upper class of Mexico, or a politician, I'm probably more loyal to the politicians of the other countries than even my own people. That's what I've seen in my experience, and I've been fucked over once like that, where someone, I was in another country and someone from my own country wasn't loyal to me. They were loyal to the system, or the people in charge, because, people are seem to be more loyal to other people in the same rank as them than their own fellow country members, which is kind of sad. And I don't know if I answered your question. I just went on a random tangent, but I guess to summarize, I don't know enough information. But if it is true, I don't think it's a conspiracy by one nation to destroy another. I feel like it's a global. It would be more of a global conspiracy to destroy the world itself. But and the other thing is, I think it's more hyped up than it is, like SARS and bird flu. All right, question number two. Do you have any hopes for Street Fighter 6 being a good game? Since it's being developed by the same guy who was in charge of Monster Hunter World, Capcom now has money, and Ono will not have a major role in it. I don't know. I feel like the last decent Street Fighter game was Street Fighter 33rd Strike, and I didn't even like that game. But I could tell that there was a lot of thought put in, much more thought put into that game than I felt Street Fighter 4 had. And I played Street Fighter 5 like 10 minutes and I was really bored, right? And Street Fighter, and these days in general, I just don't like video games. I kind of have to force myself to play them just to distract me from the time, but I don't really care for them anymore. When I see like what kids like nowadays, like Billie Eilish and things like that, I feel like I don't get it at all. And I feel like maybe because now it's like I'm like 2 or 3 generations removed from the current set of teens and tweens. So, and it's the same with video games too, where I don't really understand what the young demographic likes anymore. I never even heard of Fortnite really until like I saw YouTube videos where they're getting like gajillion views, and it's like, okay, like, but I don't get it, you know? And so I don't think I'm the best judge of nowadays of what a good game would be. But I feel like if I were to design it, I would just take basic principles of Street Fighter 2, add some combos, and I would also add new characters, right? And I think that's what Street Fighter 3 did amazingly well. In fact, in the first version of Street Fighter 3, they weren't even going to put Ryu and Ken. And they put Ryu and Ken only after like feedback from like the beta version of testing or something like that. And but I think they had much more balls back then than they do now, because all they do is bring back legacy characters, and they don't really make too many new characters anymore. Like, I mean, if you think about the transition from Tekken 2 to Tekken 3, they pretty much killed half the cast and just put in new characters. Like, they killed Beck, they killed Bruce, they killed who else did they kill? I think they killed Lee. And they put in new characters, right? Who weren't exactly the same. And I thought that blew my mind, because, you took these characters that were really popular. The game Tekken 2 was really popular. And instead of just retreading and creating sequel after sequel with the same characters like they did with Tekken 4, 5, and 6, and 7. And it wasn't until Season 3 where they actually started adding new characters for Tekken 7. It was just like a retread over and over and over again. But when you went from Tekken 2 to Tekken 3, you pretty much replaced most of the cast with a new fresh paint and new characters, which is, I think that in order to have a real sequel to Street Fighter, you have to pretty much redo the cast, even get rid of Ryu and Ken, which I think would be amazing. Right, because that's the level of balls you have to have if you're actually going to make a real sequel, which they probably won't. So, too long. My short answer is that it probably won't be a good game, because A, I don't care for Street Fighter anymore, and B, they just don't have the balls to actually implement new ideas. Question number 3: have you experienced any severe forms of racism in America, or any sort of racism? I'll be honest. I feel like the biggest oppressors I've ever felt in my life were the people I grew up with, and that has nothing to do with race, because I lived in an upper class Asian American. At least 50% of the people in the city I grew up in were Asian Americans, and so it's not like I grew up in the Midwest and I was the only Korean kid, with like everybody else being white, right? But I felt like every time I wanted to do something that other people weren't doing, and talk about the issues that I saw that really bothered me, people would really look down upon me, and every time I saw some sort of an injustice or some sort of something that was really unfair, it really bothered me. And what really bothered me is just how, like, when I bring up issues, people just don't care, and that really hurt me. And sometimes they just attack me and say, like, well, I'm just saying this because I want to feel special about myself, which was not true at all. I'm talking about this because I feel like these are relevant issues that we should talk about, that at least, this is my experience. And just seeing how people see that as a threat, and that's what happens a lot when you bring up issues, is that people, instead of seeing the criticism for what it is and saying, hey, maybe we could improve things. And think of what happened to Sonic the Hedgehog, where, Sonic looked awful, and a lot of people brought up like these criticisms like, hey man, you could do so much better with your life. Well, that's not what they existed, not your life, but with the movie. But that's the same thing I say, hey, you could do so much better with your life. And then people, 99 out of 100 people would react negatively to that. But, and that's why I respect Jeff Fowler as a director, because, he took that criticism and he said, you know what, you're right. And we can do better. And that's why, I watched Sonic the movie, and even though it was a kid's movie for like 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds, I still thought it was great. And I could see that there was a lot of love and care put into that movie, even though it was a movie for little kids. But that's unfortunate. That's how society is. So, right. So just to answer your question, never really experienced racism, but I did experience people just my own people trying to push me down, which really hurt me. I feel like many times I would feel like mentally paralyzed that my own tribe and not the other tribe would be the ones trying to keep me down. Question number 4. Do you think the past history and current impression are the reasons why African Americans are not as successful as they should be, or is it their own failures as a people? Well, I can't tell you that because obviously I'm not African American. But how should I explain this? But I'll tell you my experience as an Asian American, right? As an Asian American, I feel like the experiences of your ancestors have really nothing to do with you. Because my parents grew up poor, and they grew up in a small town, and I did not, and I can't ever relate to that. I couldn't even speak Korean for 18 years of my life. Well, until I was 18, until I made an effort to do so. So I had no, what do I call it? I had no relationship with the mother country because my parents didn't really do a good job of trying to transmit their values to me or their experiences. And I think that's what happens with a lot of kids because what happens is that, a lot of parents, they're just too busy and tired working that essentially the schools are just become a substitute for mother and father. And so if there is a dysfunction, it's probably in the system itself and how people of certain races react to being in the system, right? I can't, so for example, in my life, yes, even though let's say my father grew up in poverty, I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood, and I can't imagine experiencing what that would be like. In fact, I feel like my experience growing up in the upper middle class neighborhood was probably psychologically harder than what I experienced, because I remember throughout my teens, I was just ready to kill myself because I was like, this is the most pointless life ever, right? And I don't think my father ever experienced that because his mind was probably too busy just to survive and take care of, his other family members. I forgot how many brothers and sisters he had. I think he had he was the oldest, but he had oldest son, but I think he had 2 older brothers who passed away in childhood or infancy. And I think we had 5 or 6 aunts and uncles in total, if I remember correctly. I don't really remember correctly. But, yeah, but just because something happened to my dad doesn't mean it happened to me. Nor will, other future generations experience what my dad and his father experienced, because it was just a different time. And so I think for the most part, if there is dysfunctionality, I think it's the immediate values that parents pass on to their kids, or maybe it's their peer group, and stuff like that, and what they value. And it could also be systematic factors. I mean, I don't deny that racism exists because, there's that hashtag on Twitter, Living While Black, where someone calls the cops on Black or African American people for doing regular activities. So obviously that does exist, but I'm just speaking from my experiences that if something happened to my ancestors or my dad, it has nothing to do with me, because we grew up in totally different environments, totally different sets of groups of people. I don't think the past of someone else who you never knew determines your future. And I think that many times that's pretty much a cop out. And you see this a lot in society where people will give you a billion excuses not to change their path in life. They'll do it all the time, you know, whether it's, you know, whether if they're sick, right? They'll blame it on their genetics. Same thing with their weight. Even though if you look at this country 100 years ago, nobody was overweight, and now the majority of people are overweight. You'll see it everywhere, right? But you know, people as a whole in society don't want to take any responsibility for their actions, and so what they do is they end up blaming something that they feel like they have no control over. And so if they are dysfunctional, they don't have to take responsibility because they're going to blame it on their other thing that they have no control over. And you know, that's just unfortunate in life. That really is. But I can't, like I said, I can't explain the plight of the African American people because I am not African American, nor did I grow up in that environment. But I can explain to you my thoughts as an Asian American. Okay, so this is Ha Man here again, the Ha Man, with another video. If you have any thoughts, comments, leave them below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.